Welcome to LEWS podcast, and thanks for joining us for the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on, a really fascinating deep dive. Think of it like a book review discussion. We're looking at a work that's really stirred things up around, personal control and emotional freedom. It's the Let Them Theory by the very well-known motivational speaker Mel Robbins, and she co-authored it with her daughter Sawyer Robbins. Our mission today, really, for you, is to unpack the core idea of this book. We want to explore its practical applications, look at what makes it, frankly, so powerful for so many people, and importantly, also touch on some of the critiques it's received. We're hoping to figure out together how just two, while seemingly simple words, let them, can potentially unlock some real emotional freedom and maybe help you navigate, the complexities, the sometimes frustrating parts of our relationship. So yeah, are you ready to explore how something that sounds so straightforward could actually have such a big impact on daily life?
It is a really compelling idea, isn't it? This core concept that um, by choosing to let go of control over external things, especially other people's actions, their opinions, you actually gain, well, a deeper sense of inner peace,
Yeah.
agency even. It kind of goes against our instincts sometimes, which is maybe why it's so interesting.
Absolutely. And this book, The Let Them Theory, it really just, wow, exploded onto the scene, released just December 2024, right? But it climbed the bestseller lists almost instantly. It clearly resonated with a huge number of readers who are, like you said, searching for that emotional freedom, that sense of personal empowerment. It feels like it tapped into something collective, That struggle many of us have, that urge to fix things, control things, influence outcomes that, well, are ultimately out of our hands. The speed of its success. I mean, sites like the Reading Nook, Very Well Mind mentioned it. It just shows how needed this message is right now.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how the book takes this fundamental psychological idea, locus of control, essentially, and just distills it, makes it incredibly digestible, actionable. At its heart, the let them theory is urging you consciously to release that impulse, the impulse to control other people's actions, their beliefs, their decisions, even their behavior. The mantra, let them, it's not about giving up or being apathetic, not at all. It's presented as an active choice, a choice to acknowledge that others have their own agency, right? They get to make their own choices, whether we agree or not. And then, just as vital, is a sort of implied, let me, which pushes you to turn inward, to focus on your own responses, your boundaries, your well-being. It's a really profound shift in focus, isn't it? Away from trying to control the external, which is often futile, towards empowering yourself by managing your internal reactions.
It's interesting because when I first started looking into this, the concept itself isn't entirely brand new, is it? I immediately thought of, well, Stoicism, ancient philosophy, Epictetus distinguishing between what's up to us and not up to us, clear line. Or even like modern therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT,
Sure.
which emphasizes accepting what you can't change and acting on what you can. But what Robbins does, and does so well, I think, is package these complex ideas into this incredibly accessible, relatable framework, something anyone can just grasp and sort of start applying right away.
Exactly. It's about taking that deep wisdom and making it work, making it resonate
Yeah.
in our, well, often pretty overwhelming modern lives.
And the origin story, it's actually quite relatable, which I think is a huge part of its appeal, why it connects.
Hmm.
Mel Robbins, super successful speaker, author, finds herself in this totally typical stressful parenting moment. Apparently, she was trying to orchestrate her son's prom night down to the last detail.
Oh, I can picture that.
Totally tangled up in logistics, group photos, pre-prom dinner timings, all of it. Stressed out, overwhelmed, feeling that, parental need for everything to be perfect.
Hmm.
And then her daughter, Sawyer, just says something incredibly simple but really wise. Mom, just let them handle it.
Wow. Simple as that.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Mel Robbins, this woman known for controlling narratives, motivating millions, suddenly faced with her own need to control, like, a prom night. And that moment, that conscious choice to release control, step back, let her son and his friends figure it out, it sparked this huge realization for her. It wasn't really about the prom itself.
It was bigger.
It was about the fundamental pattern, wasn't it? Trying to control things that just weren't hers to control. It's that kind of real-world, messy, imperfect situation that birthed the whole philosophy. That authenticity makes it so compelling.
That story really nails the core idea, doesn't it? That so much of our stress, our anxiety, often our unhappiness, it genuinely stems from trying to control things that are, frankly, just beyond our influence. And this is especially true when it comes to other people, their behaviors, their choices, their decisions, even what they think of us. Just think about how much mental energy, how much emotional energy we pour into manipulating situations. trying to convince people, trying to change people who, let's be honest, aren't going to change just because we want them to.
Yeah.
That energy, the book argues, would be so much better spent internally, focusing on what you can actually control.
That is powerful. But okay, the big question for a lot of listeners might be, all right, I get it conceptually, I should let them. But how? How do I actually do that when it feels so ingrained, so automatic to try to control? What are the practical steps Robbins offers? How do you implement this?
Yeah, and that's where the book gets really practical, which is great. Robbins doesn't just leave you with the theory. She gives clear, actionable strategies. She outlines 4 key practices to help you actually integrate this let-them mindset day to day. The first one is about recognizing. Recognizing when you're trying to control others. This means becoming really aware of your own internal chatter, your external actions. Are you constantly giving advice nobody asked for? Are you pushing someone who isn't listening? Feeling anxious or maybe resentful because someone isn't doing what you think they should? It's about catching yourself in that moment of, well, overreaching. Like if you're constantly checking up on your grandkids' choices maybe, or getting annoyed a friend isn't taking your brilliant advice, that's your cue. Recognize the control impulse.
Okay, so it's like a self-awareness check, catching yourself in the act. Got it. Once you've recognized it, what's next?
The second step is to shift your perspective. This is key. It's about really internalizing that other people's actions, their choices, even their flaws, they're usually much more about them, about their own needs, their insecurities, their history, their worldview, than they are about you. It's generally not personal, even when it feels incredibly personal.
Right. That's a tough one sometimes.
It is. For instance, if a colleague drops the ball on a deadline, it's probably not a deliberate attack on you. It could be their own disorganization, their workload, something personal going on. Shifting perspective means unhooking your self-worth, your emotional state, from their behavior. Realizing their actions reflect their internal world, not necessarily a judgment on yours.
Okay, detaching. That makes sense because, yeah, it's so easy to take things personally. So you recognize, you shift perspective, and how do you protect your own space in all this?
Which leads right into the third strategy, setting boundaries. And crucially, this isn't about controlling them. It's about defining your limits, focusing on your needs and responses. What are you okay with? What are you responsible for? And maybe most importantly, what are you not responsible for? This might mean saying no more often to things that drain you,
Yeah.
or limiting time with people who are always negative, or just deciding, you know what? I'm not having this argument again. It's about defining your territory, protecting your energy. It can be the hardest step, honestly. It might involve some short-term discomfort, maybe even conflict,
Sure.
but it's fundamental for reclaiming your peace. The book really emphasizes that letting them means handing back responsibility for their choices to them, which frees you up from carrying that weight.
That's incredibly practical. And yeah, definitely something a lot of us struggle with, setting those boundaries. Okay, so what about the emotional side? The guilt, maybe. What's a fourth step?
The fourth step, and it's really vital, is practicing self-compassion. This means actively letting go of any guilt or shame or responsibility you might feel for other people's choices or, how things turn out for them. You can't control their actions, so you don't need to carry the emotional burden of those actions either. It's about acknowledging, okay, I'm doing my best here. I'm not responsible for another adult's decisions. It's okay to prioritize my own well-being. For example, if someone you care about makes a choice you think is harmful, self-compassion means acknowledging your sadness or concern, sure, but then consciously releasing the need to fix it, or worse, blame yourself. And these aren't just vague ideas. Robbins gives specific, mental exercises, scripts even, to help you apply these steps in the moment.
Okay, so recognize, shift perspective, set boundaries, practice self-compassion. And if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, the so what? The outcome of doing all this consistently, it seems pretty clear, right? It's not just theory. It leads to tangible changes.
Precisely. Yeah, absolutely. By consistently working on these 4 strategies, the intended outcomes are, well, pretty significant for your day-to-day life. You'll likely feel a real reduction in stress simply because you're not pouring energy into battles you can't win.
Makes sense.
You might see a noticeable improvement in your relationships, not because you're changing them, but because you're approaching interactions from a place of acceptance with clearer boundaries. And ultimately, it points towards a profound enhancement of your overall emotional well-being. The real insight here, I think, isn't just less stress, it's the liberation. The mental bandwidth you get back when you stop fighting those futile battles. Imagine what you could do, what you could create, what problems you could actually solve if that energy was redirected. redirected towards your own growth, your goals, your peace. It's finding peace by kind of strategically changing your internal response, not the whole world around you.
That redirection of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels like a game changer. So, thinking about this as our book review discussion, what are the things that really make the let them theory work so well? Why is it so impactful for so many people? What's its secret sauce?
Well, I think what stands out most, and you see this echoed in tons of reviews, is its sheer simplicity and clarity. In a self-help world that can be pretty complex, sometimes jargon-filled,
Right.
Robbins just cuts through it. She distills potentially complex psychological stuff into straightforward, easy-to-get language. You don't need a psych degree to understand the core message. It's built for a broad audience. Makes it less intimidating than, say, a dense academic book. And that simplicity, that's actually a huge strength. It makes the idea stick, memorable. Secondly, she's just a master storyteller, using those relatable anecdotes. She doesn't just theorize. She illustrates with stories from her own life. We talked about the prom story. But there are others, too, navigating tricky family stuff, dealing with work frustrations. Exactly. They're not abstract examples. They're real moments where she applied let them and saw a real difference. That personal vulnerability makes the theory resonate because readers can easily see themselves in those situations. They think, oh yeah, I've been there. This sounds like exactly what I need. And finally, the advice itself is just incredibly actionable. It's not one of those books that leaves you feeling inspired but kind of lost, wondering, okay, now what?
Yeah, hate those.
Right. The strategies she gives are described as easy to implement. They offer immediate, tangible benefits, potentially. She gives you concrete steps, like the 4 we just talked through. That's what so many readers want from self-help. A roadmap, not just a philosophy. A practical toolkit.
That relatability and actionability definitely seem key. I know for me, seeing clear steps made it feel much more achievable. But okay, like any really influential work, even one that gets a lot of praise, the let them theory has faced some critiques too. It's important to have that balanced view and a deep dive, right? What are some of the main criticisms that people have raised?
You're absolutely right. No book pleases everyone. And even strong concepts can have perceived downsides depending on what a reader is looking for. One common point you see mentioned in reviews is about the repetitiveness. Some readers feel that the core phrase, let them, gets repeated, well, very frequently throughout the book. Now, clearly, it's the central mantra. It's meant for emphasis, for memorability, almost like an affirmation. But for some, that constant repetition can start to feel a bit redundant after a while, maybe even slightly tiresome. They might feel like, okay, I got the point, and feel it's being hammered home maybe a bit too much, making parts feel stretched. Another critique, and this often comes from people with maybe more of a psychology background, is a perceived lack of depth. The argument is that while the book is fantastic for practical advice, it doesn't really dig deep into the underlying psychological theories.
Okay, so less of the why behind the what.
Kind of. For instance, it talks about control, but maybe doesn't deeply explore, say, the cognitive biases driving our need for control, or the neurological side of anxiety related to external things. So if you're looking for a really comprehensive, academically rigorous breakdown of boundaries, or cognitive shifts, or attachment theory, this book might feel a bit, well, surface level. It's definitely more of a practical guide than a scholarly text, which, as we said, is a strength for many, but could be seen as a limitation by others.
That's a really interesting distinction, and it makes you think, doesn't it? How the very simplicity that's a huge strength for one person, making it accessible, easy to digest, could be seen as a limitation by someone else looking for a much deeper, more nuanced, maybe more academic exploration. It really depends on what you, as the reader, are actually looking for in a book like this. It's kind of a paradox of popular self-help sometimes.
Exactly. It just highlights that different books, different approaches, serve different needs and different audiences. For many, that direct, actionable simplicity is precisely its value. It's about making complex ideas useful now, rather than just dissecting them academically.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive on the let them theory, what's the bottom line? The overall value, considering its big strengths and, those critiques we mentioned, what does it ultimately offer someone?
Well, looking at the bigger picture of personal growth, I think the let them theory offers a genuinely refreshing and I'd say empowering approach. It really champions this idea of emotional liberation by encouraging us to accept others' autonomy fully, not fight it, not try to manipulate it. Now, it might not be introducing, completely groundbreaking psychological theories that haven't been touched on elsewhere in some form. But its real power, I believe, lies in that unparalleled practical advice combined with incredibly relatable storytelling. That mix makes it a genuinely valuable resource for anyone wanting to boost their emotional resilience, cut down on daily stress, and, frankly, improve their relationships significantly. And it does all that without bogging you down in dense academic stuff. It makes profound insights feel digestible and, crucially, actionable in everyday life.
That's a great summary. So the core message from this deep dive into the let them theory really boils down to this. There's profound well-being, a real sense of freedom available when you consciously let go of controlling external things, especially other people, their choices, their opinions, and instead you rigorously focus on your own responses, your own boundaries. It's that shift, isn't it, from what can I make happen to what can I allow to happen and how will I respond peacefully?
Exactly. And that leads nicely into maybe a final thought, a provocative one perhaps, for you to mull over as you go about your day. How much of your daily peace, your sense of calm, your overall well-being is actually tied up in your ability to truly distinguish, to differentiate between what you can control your thoughts, reactions, boundaries, and what you absolutely must accept? How does really internalizing that distinction, living by it, actually impact your daily life, your inner calm?
Mm. Powerful stuff to consider. Definitely something that resonates, I think. If you are interested in diving deeper into Mel Robbins' work, her philosophy, you can check out her official website. It's melrobbins.com. And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Thanks so much for joining us on this exploration today. We'll see you next time.